Meeting at the White House. Archbishop Warda of Iraq takes the plight of persecuted Christians to Vice President Mike Pence. Wedding cake showdown. Supreme Court justices prepare to take on a religious liberty case. We'll have a preview. Pope Francis is back at the Vatican. The Holy Father wraps up his historic trip to Myanmar and Bangladesh. We'll talk to Edward Penton, who traveled with the pontiff. And the wonder of God's creation. The supermoon shines down for the first and only time this year. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, December 4th, 2017. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We are following a key meeting today at the White House, where Iraqi Archbishop Bashar Warda paid a visit to Vice President Mike Pence. Warda wants the U.S. to follow through on its commitment to help Christians displaced by war. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
A White House official tells me Vice President Pence and Archbishop Warda discussed the president's commitment to helping victims of religious persecution in Iraq. Our EWTN News Nightly camera spotted Archbishop Warda leaving the White House and walking into the executive office building next door right after the high-level meeting. I'm told the Vice President updated Warda on U.S. plans to speed up the distribution of American aid. I'm also told the Archbishop let Vice President Pence know about the current conditions in Iraq. Lauren, last week, Archbishop Warda told you about his push to help Christians resettle in Iraq and the need to expedite U.S. aid. Here's a little bit of your conversation last week.
Vice President Pence said that the government is going to contribute directly. Have you seen those funds?
Not yet.
Why not?
Well, this is one of the reasons also that I am here, to call the U.S. government. Thank you for what you have offered, but where is the offering? We are waiting, and we cannot wait more. So please do it fast.
The White House tells me Archbishop Warda thanked the Vice President for the Trump administration's leadership and compassion. Lauren.
Mark, did we learn any more about when that U.S. aid money will finally arrive in Iraq?
They would only say they're trying to speed up the process. We haven't yet heard an exact timeline. We could also learn more when the Vice President visits the Middle East later this month. Lauren.
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. The Vice President's trip to Egypt and Israel next month will be the latest visit to the region by representatives of the administration. Late last month, however, 6 members of President Trump's evangelical advisory team, including our next guest, headed to Egypt. We're now joined by Johnny Moore, founder and CEO of the Kairos company. He's also an evangelical advisor to President Trump. Welcome to the program.
Great to be with you.
You met, a delegation of Christians, including yourself, met with Vice President Pence's team about his trip to Egypt and Israel. What are you advising him to do?
Well, first of all, we were reflecting on our own trip to Egypt recently. You know, we were a delegation of Christians. We had an hour-long meeting scheduled with President Sisi in Egypt that went for nearly 3 hours. And we found a president of one of the most important Islamic countries in the world totally interested in talking about the persecution of Christians around that region. And so we conveyed to the Vice President's office bits of information we learned when we were there.
He's traveling, I think, later this month. What are you expecting to come out of that meeting?
I'm pretty optimistic. I mean, just the meetings that took place today, in the White House alone, not to mention many other meetings many of us have been a part of. I mean, this administration, every other day, it seems like they're doing something to focus on the issue of religious minorities, in particular Christians in the Middle East. And by the way, there's a lot of work to do. I mean, we have years.
They haven't seen an ounce of funding, as Archbishop Bashar Warda told me last week, that even though President Pence has promised money and aid to Christians in Iraq and Syria, nothing has been sent.
Well, but I think it's important to know. I mean, it was just 1 month ago when they made the policy change, right?
So but it's been months. It's been months and years. Actually,
Lauren, it's been years. That's exactly
yes.
right. I mean, the Obama administration, every chance they could, they stopped this. And this administration is at least trying to get the malaise of government moving in a positive direction. And sometimes we're fighting against our own government. But I can guarantee something. I know President Trump. I know Vice President Pence. If they intend on doing this, it's going to get done. It's only a matter of time. And so far, they've been able to get some things done more quickly than I think we expected.
I want to show some video of Egypt and the attacks that were on the Christians over the past year. In the spring, or last December 1st, there was a bombing in Cairo. It killed 30 Coptic Christians during a Sunday Mass. And then in April, in the spring, suicide bombers hit 2 churches during Palm Sunday Mass. And the militants attacked a bus with Coptic Christians in May. So in your discussions with the Sisi, what is he saying to you that they can do to protect against terrorism?
What we saw in President Sisi was a intention to do everything he could to stop it. I mean, there was this really powerful moment in the meeting where fire came in his eyes, and he said, as long as I'm president of this country, this will not happen again. And what he was speaking about the political persecution and the fall of the Muslim Brotherhood when dozens of churches were destroyed, and then he conveyed to us his desire to get help from the United States in combating terrorism in the region. And I left the meeting, I went in not knowing what to expect, and I left the meeting pretty optimistic about what can be done.
You do sound optimistic.
I am.
I hope you're right.
Well,
I hope you're right, and we'll see how the trip goes. And it does seem as if there is quite a bit of momentum, thanks in part to you and your organization. Johnny Moore, Evangelical Advisor to President Trump. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
President Trump travels to Utah and tells supporters he'll always protect religious liberty. Earlier, the president met with Mormon leaders.
Well, thank you very much for being here, and this is very exciting for me. I know so many.
The president visited Welfare Square, a complex in Salt Lake City run by the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints that provides aid to the poor. President Trump also announced he's scaling back 2 national monuments in that state. The president formally endorses Alabama Senate nominee Roy Moore. The White House says the president and Moore spoke on the phone and had a positive call. Many lawmakers, including GOP leaders, have called on Moore to step down following allegations of sexual assault. A giant step toward giving President Donald Trump one of his top priorities by Christmas, as Republicans pass the largest tax overhaul in more than 30 years. The vote Friday was mostly along party lines, with 51 in favor of the bill, 49 against it. Senator Bob Corker was the only Republican to vote against the bill. The House of Representatives approved its own tax reform plan last month. Now the 2 chambers are expected to reconcile both bills during a conference. The Supreme Court is set to hear a case with profound implications on religion's place in public life. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi tells us people are camping outside the court.
Lauren, it's a showdown between a same-sex couple in Colorado and a Denver area baker. In 2012, he cited his Christian beliefs for refusing to bake them a cake for their wedding celebration. You can see people already lining up here for oral arguments which take place tomorrow. And one of those people is Rebecca.
Hi.
Rebecca, when did you get here?
I got here yesterday evening.
And I know you're a Georgetown law student. You've been studying this case in your law classes. Where do you side?
I side on the baker's side. For personal reasons, I was raised Catholic, so the religious liberty issue is a personal one for me, but then also the free speech arguments I find very compelling. So that is the side I would fall on.
Do you think the Supreme Court is going to side with the baker?
I wouldn't be surprised, but I would expect it to be a very narrow ruling. So we'll have to see tomorrow, though.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
The case, these crowds here for Masterpiece Cake Shop versus the Colorado Civil Rights Commission.
Jack Phillips is the owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop in suburban Denver. He's also a devout Christian. Phillips told the gay couple in 2012 he wouldn't make a cake for their wedding reception.
Because I feel I'm also participating in the cake. I'm participating in the wedding by making the cake. And in a same-sex wedding, I can't participate in that because it goes against my faith.
The couple, David Mullins and Charlie Craig, say it's discrimination.
So this case is not about a cake. It's not about a baker. It's not about artistic freedom. It's about us being able to be free to be treated, to be treated equally in the public realm.
An appeals court agreed, saying Phillips broke Colorado's anti-discrimination law. But Phillips' lawyers say it's about free speech. His cakes are a form of art, and the government is trying to force him to express that art in a certain way.
advocacy group CatholicVote.org, as well as the U.S. Bishops Conference and the Department of Justice, are all urging the court to side with Jack Phillips. We're expecting supporters on both sides to rally right here at the Supreme Court tomorrow in this case that could impact religious freedom for decades to come. Lauren?
Thank you, Jason. Dreamers, or those illegally brought into the United States as kids, rally on Capitol Hill.
I'm reading this to honor my mom, who has given me strength and who has allowed me to be the person that I am today.
Some of the 800,000 Dreamers today want Congress's protection. President Obama shielded the young immigrants from deportation, but President Trump ended that program, giving Congress until March to come up with a fix. The U.S. Bishops Conference is urging Congress to protect the Dreamers. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson announces the United States will pull out of a global agreement on migration. Tillerson says the pact undermines national security. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. Secretary Tillerson says the Trump administration has serious objections to the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants. He says the UN deal does not allow the U.S. to enforce our immigration laws or secure our borders.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson says we simply cannot in good faith support a process that could undermine the sovereign right of the United States to enforce our immigration laws and secure our borders. Tillerson says the U.S. will engage with the United Nations on a number of fronts, but this is not one of them. The Obama administration supported the deal, known as the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants, when it was drafted last year. Its goal is to ensure the rights of migrants, help them resettle, and provide them with access to education and jobs. It's set to be adopted next year by the United Nations. A top UN official expresses his regret at the U.S. decision. He says no one nation can manage international migration alone.
Pope Francis has also been talking about migration and refugees during his recent trip to Myanmar and Bangladesh. The Holy Father denouncing anti-immigration political movements and issued a call for a more welcoming policy towards migrants. Lauren?
Wyatt, what are the U.S. bishops saying?
Well, the Bishops' Conference has not commented on this move as of yet, but the Catholic Church has always supported and defended the rights of migrants. They said that it's important, both sort of this balance, both to respect each country's right to secure its own borders, but also taking into account the importance of welcoming the poor and the marginalized. Lauren?
It's a tightrope. Thank you, Correspondent Wyatt Goolsby, reporting from the State Department. Rebels in Yemen kill the country's former president. Ali Abdullah Saleh was killed as rebels battled for control of the capital. Saleh ruled Yemen for more than 3 decades before being ousted in a 2011 Arab Spring uprising. Yemen has been in a civil war for nearly 3 years. The U.S. and South Korea launch a massive combined Air Force exercise. It comes a week after North Korea test-launched its most powerful missile, one that might be able to reach the continental U.S. 2 lawmakers say there are discussions to build a missile defense system, likely on the West Coast. Church officials in South Korea launch an online petition to keep abortion illegal. They're trying to get 1 million signatures. A request to the president to legalize abortion drew more than 200,000 signatures. Abortion is banned in the country except in the case of rape or if the unborn baby has a disease. Pope Francis is back in Rome after a trip to Myanmar and Bangladesh, but he says he's still reflecting on the noble faces he saw there. The Pope made headlines and sparked controversy on his week-long tour, but its effects might be felt for much longer in both countries. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Ed, was that trip a success?
It was, Lauren, I think certainly from the Pope's point of view, because the Pope really wanted to draw attention to 2 key topics that he's very interested in his pontificate, which is interreligious dialogue and the issue of migrants. And both of those were front and center of this visit. But also on the Church's side as well, that it was important that the Church, the minorities, very small minorities in Bangladesh and Burma were put on the map, as Vatican spokesman Greg Burke put it. and but also from the part of the governments too. I think they were happy too, especially the Burmese government, because it showed them to be a nation of stability, and the Pope goes there. It gives them a certain importance, if you like.
The big controversy was over one word, Rohingya. Why did the Pope not do it? And tell us the defense that he is putting forward.
Right. Well, he didn't mention it because it's a taboo word in Burma. He didn't mention it in Burma because it is a problematic word for various reasons, complicated reasons really. But it was safe. He felt it was prudent not to say it there. He spoke on the plane about a message arriving and a message being well received, and he felt that it would be better received if he mentioned the word in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, which he did. And I think it seemed to go down well that way, and it seemed to have the effect that the Pope wanted.
You know, the Pope, as you have said before, is known as the Pope of the peripheries. So tell us, where are you going next with the Pope?
Well, I think the next visit for the Pope is going to be to Chile and Peru on January the 15th to the 22nd. It's going to be a trip to the peripheries because he's going to be really reaching out to the indigenous people there and going to visit the Amazon. So it's an important visit in that sense, and the indigenous people are very much of concern to the Pope. It'll be his I think the 5th trip to his home continent, Latin America. So it'll be quite important as well for him, this upcoming visit as well.
Thank you so much, Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register. Get some rest.
Thanks, Lauren. Will do.
È impresso in me il ricordo di tanti volti provati dalla vita.
Pope Francis wants us to pay attention this Advent. During his weekly Angelus in Rome this Sunday, the Holy Father said that means being concerned about others and trying to fight against indifference in this world. The Pope's busy schedule may not quiet down anytime soon. Church leaders in South Sudan are asking him to visit their war-torn country. The Holy Father has donated about $30,000 to the region to help feed the hungry during the upcoming dry season. Pope Francis was scheduled to visit last October, but canceled due to security concerns. Coming up, Russia probe. What the Kremlin is saying about conversations between the president's former national security advisor and the Russian ambassador. The Daily Caller's Vince Colanese is in the house. Georgetown University will continue to cover contraception despite not being forced to do so by law. The Trump administration expanded a list of organizations that can claim religious exemptions to that contraceptive mandate in Obamacare. Now, before the mandate in 2013, the university followed church teaching and did not cover contraception. President Trump tells reporters he sympathizes with Michael Flynn and thinks his former national security advisor is being treated unfairly.
Well, I feel badly for General Flynn. I feel very badly. He's led a very strong life, and I feel very badly.
Flynn pleaded guilty last week to lying about the FBI about conversations with Russia's ambassador. These are the first charges in special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation against a former Trump administration official. Joining me now is Vince Colanese, editorial director at the Daily Caller, host of Washington's Mornings on the Mall on WMAL Radio. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
This morning, Trump lawyer John Dowd said the president can't be accused of obstruction of justice. Do you agree?
Yeah, I talked to two legal experts on this morning, former U.S. Attorney Joe DeGeneva and also Michael Mukasey, former Attorney General under George W. Bush. They both agree it's not, as a criminal matter, he can't be charged with this, obstruction of justice. Now, it's a different matter, though, when it comes to whether the House of Representatives wants to pursue impeachment over it. They can just make a judgment call whether they think the president acted improperly.
Because one Nixon article of impeachment was for obstruction.
Right. So this is separate from him being able to be charged criminally for something like this, which can't be done according to the Constitution.
Are media rushing to judgment in assuming that Michael Flynn can incriminate Donald Trump?
Yeah, because we don't know all the details yet. We don't know the terms of a deal if he's actually reached one. And also, you know, this could be just in isolation. Robert Mueller's investigation, the special counsel, has been pretty far-reaching. I mean, we've seen him already go after people for failure to register as foreign agents. And now in the case of Michael Flynn, they're going after him for lying to the FBI. Not what we don't have right now is a clear case of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, which is clearly why this thing got kicked off in the first place.
ABC News issued a report. It was Brian Ross who said that Flynn planned to testify that as a candidate, Trump directed Flynn to make contact with Russian officials. It turns out that is false. Does this give the president more standing to say fake news, fake news?
Well, definitely. If the press was hoping to have moral footing against the president of the United States, the big three networks all have huge black eyes right now in terms of being able to do that. They've lost for moral reasons, both Charlie Rose at CBS and Matt Lauer at NBC. And here, as a merit-based reason, just in terms of his job, you have Brian Ross failing to report the news accurately. They had to issue a massive correction, and this is actually one as a part of a long chain of big news stories that Brian Ross has messed up.
And now he's only on a 4-week suspension.
That's right.
From what I understand for right now. What do you make of President Trump saying that he feels bad for Flynn, but then turning around and attacking Hillary Clinton, saying she wasn't indicted for lying to the FBI? Do you think this is just a distraction?
Well, I think he sincerely cares about this. I mean, he fired Mike Flynn, so he clearly thought that there should be some consequences for his lying to at least Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States. With respect to Hillary Clinton, I mean, it seems like the case is pretty clear that she's told untruths in public about the nature of her email use, which is obviously what came under FBI investigation. She said she didn't send or receive classified emails. Classified emails appeared in her email. She said she turned over all of her emails to the government. 17,000 more emails were found by the State Department Inspector General. So there's a pattern of untruths associated with this, and I think the president's pointing out, how come this guy gets caught for lying, but Hillary Clinton goes on a pattern of lying and never gets busted for it? It's a question I don't think he's alone in asking.
Thank you so much. Vince Colonnese, editorial director at The Daily Caller.
Thank you, Lauren.
Up next, joy amidst suffering. Boston's Cardinal O'Malley visits the hurricane-ravaged territory of Puerto Rico for a first-hand look. And the supermoon shines. Incredible images from last night's stellar show in the sky. St. John Damascene is honored today on his feast day. Born in Damascus, Syria in the 7th century, he migrated to Jerusalem and became a monk. He's a doctor of the church. Schools in Australia are referring a growing number of junior high school students to a suicide intervention service run by a Catholic organization. A report in the Adelaide Advertiser says there were 28 referrals last year, but in the first 3 months of this term, there were 42. Officials are asking all teachers to be trained to identify at-risk students. Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston visits Puerto Rico to see firsthand the work Catholic Charities is doing in the wake of 2 hurricanes. The Cardinal writes on his blog, many people still are without phones, electricity, and water, including all but one Capuchin parish. But Catholic Charities is getting food and water to people, especially those who live in rural areas. O'Malley had worked in Puerto Rico as a parish priest. There is work to be done in Cardinal O'Malley's home parish, too. The Boston Globe reports the city's main church, the 142-year-old Cathedral of the Holy Cross, is set for a $25 million renovation. Recently proposed improvements never went forward after the city's clergy abuse scandal in 2002. Pastor Kevin O'Leary says the work will be done by Easter 2019 and adds the church will, quote, be a symbol of hope for what we've been through. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We leave you tonight with the first and only supermoon of the year. These photos taken last night here in Washington, D.C. show the Capitol dwarfed by that big old thing. Supermoons happen when the sun, moon, and earth align, while a full or new moon aligns with the sun's lunar orb. And if you know what I just said, you went a lot farther in science than I did. 2 more of these things will be visible in January. How beautiful. Good night, and God bless you.